Street, and the time is 5:30 p.m. We are holding a meeting at the City Hall Building, 100 South Monroe Street in Eagle Pass, Texas. We'll start by establishing quorum. We do have all members of the commission present. Next, we have citizens communication. Do we have anybody signed up for citizens communication?
No, sir.
Nobody signed up, so we'll move on to selection of chairperson. If Mr. Gross is willing and able, I'll make a motion to nominate Mr. Kenneth Gross to be the chairperson of the commission. Is there a second on the motion? No second?
Did he answer? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm willing.
Is there a second on the motion? No second? All right, then we'll entertain another motion.
I make a motion for Commission Member Velez.
All right, motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Commissioner Salina Sanchez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, selection of vice chairperson. Is there a motion to select the vice chair?
Who are you recommending or?
Well,
Who would like to be vice?
Yeah, we can be the vice.
Yeah,
Would you
absolutely.
accept it?
Absolutely.
so motion by Commissioner Salina Sanchez to nominate Mr. Kenneth Gross to serve as vice chairperson. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Valdez. All those in favor? Aye, motion passes. So we'll move on to minutes. Number one, approval of the minutes of the May 11th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Salina Sanchez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Velasquez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. New business, item number two, consideration and possible action on the plat amendment of lots 2 through 7 in Block 1 of the Bona Heights addition.
Sure. So we have, first of all, congratulations to both of you.
JJ.
And before I go into that item, we have our legal, in the meeting, Mr. Rubén Valadez.
Good to be here.
So, what you have before you is a plat amendment, for property located at, 1350 Del Rio Boulevard, 1160 Bonnet, and 1110 Bonnet. It's, three property owners. And the reason behind the application is to correct, or property lines. Throughout the years, the properties were conveyed, somewhere encroaching up to another property, and so, that's the reason behind the actual, plat amendment. As you can see, this is a lot, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, but this is, the Rio Boulevard. You have Bonnet. And so what they're doing is this is the actual, what initiated the application, these two lots. But because there's an encroachment between all these lots here, all the applicants had to be in agreement for the plat to go through. So they've signed off on the application, and they're also going to be included in the plat drawing. Go back. So here are some site views of the subject property. This is off of Del Rio Boulevard. This one here too. And this one is off of Bonnet, which is more of a flag-shaped lot, or two lots. So they have access through here and through Del Rio Boulevard. With that said, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Planning Department recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant approval of the final plat amendment of lots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in Block 1 of the Bona Heights addition, subject to the plat complying with the provisions of Article 3 of the City of Eagle Pass Code of Ordinances, Chapter 23, governing procedures and specifications for final plats. And that concludes the report. If there's any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions. Is there a motion on the item?
I motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Salinas Sanchez. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gross. Any further questions, comments? Not all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item number 3, consideration and possible action on the master plan of the Santa Maria Estate subdivision.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. So this item is part of our ordinance that's fairly recently adopted, where any plats that are part of a phased development, meaning they are going, not all of the land is being developed at once. Part of the requirement is that a master plan for all those future phases is presented and approved by Planning and Zoning as well as City Council. So we are looking at the master plan for the Santa Maria Estate subdivision, which in just a moment we'll be covering also the phase 2 for this subdivision. The area is off of Highway 57 behind, and you could also access through Legacy Boulevard, behind Latigo Apartments, and also in the vicinity by Calle de los Santos. The applicant is Tech Services and the owner is MVN Enterprises LLC. A couple of site photos are shown here, and you could see a couple of residential houses from part of phase 1 already complete there, as well as some of the Latigo Apartments units in the background there in the bottom photo. So this master plan, I believe this is the version that we received prior to phase 1. We do have the applicants here, the engineer of record, so we may have, if you have any questions for them. But it does show it's over 100 total. Can you remind me the total number of lots for the entire subdivision? 104. So they are broken up into 29 was on the unit 1, 28 as part of this unit 2 that we'll be discussing in a minute, 26 and 24. So the total of 104 that Mr. Lipson just mentioned encompasses this full master plan community. Here's a closer view where you can see the lots and blocks, the detention pond at the bottom left of your image over here. And then the road connecting, so from north, from the top of your screen, that would be connection from Legacy Boulevard. And then at the bottom is where the connection to Calle de los Santos would be. So you can see Legacy Boulevard there at the top. Phase 1 is here. Phase 2 would be on this bottom section. And then the road would connect to De Los Santos. So I'm not sure if this was, I do have a question myself right now for the applicants. Was this the latest version?
It's a previous one, but everything stayed the same except the 3 lots at the south of the property on the bottom is now 1 commercial lot instead of 3 lots at the bottom.
Okay. So, yeah, and I'm going to flip ahead, so just to show you unit 2, which is here. There's a couple of images of the plat for unit 2, just so you could see the difference of what we just referenced there. So this bottom part that gets closer to the Calle de los Santos area, you'll see this block as well as these are gonna be a little bit different than what was previously shown on the master plan. So block 5, basically these two down here and those two up there. So now looking at those, I'm gonna flip back just to show you point out those differences. So you can see before, these were 3 different lots facing into the Santa Maria Boulevard. And then as you saw in the previous, this one larger lot, the intention is to do apartments versus individual lots for residential. And then the other difference is the bold lines showing the different phases. So these two are now included as part of phase 2, which, again, some small changes. So the recommendation here for the Planning and Zoning Department is that we grant the approval for the master plan for Santa Maria Estates subdivision, subject to them complying with the provisions of City of Eagle Pass Code of Ordinances, as well as, and it's not listed on here, but as well as just updating to reflect those changes that they pointed out. So they're fairly minor. I don't think it's anything that we need to halt this meeting or this item, but just to reflect those changes so that we have an accurate copy of the current plan development and the way it's being laid out, as well, which also includes connecting the street as part of phase 2. If you look at this version, the previous version that we received before phase 1, I believe the intention was also that the connection was not going to be done until phase 3 or 4. So there's just a couple of changes that do make an impact that we would request the updated version be submitted. So we do recommend approval pending that update. And then again, like I said, the applicants are here. If you have any questions for them regarding this master plan.
The current parkland ordinance, how does that affect this development? Or are they required under the current ordinance to dedicate any parkland?
The current ordinance allows for what are called minor subdivisions under 50 units for the cash in lieu. And so that's what's happening in this. In each phase that's being done, they're contributing the cash in lieu.
So then if these are going to be considered minor because they're doing it in phases?
That's the way we've interpreted the rule, and that's the way it's been applied for quite some time. But it is part of why we're looking at revising the parkland ordinance to try to address some of those type of things. But yeah, that's a good observation. So this area, now that, since you brought up that topic, if we look at the area, I think it would be a great location for a neighborhood park. There's quite a few homes as part of the Calle Los Santos area. Then this area is going to have over 100 homes. They have a large regional park very close by in terms of the new sports complex, or relatively new sports complex. But this a neighborhood park could have served well for this roughly 150 or 200 homes that are on that side. But current ordinance, they'll be moving forward. There will not be a park as part of this development.
Any questions from the commission?
No.
No.
All right.
Did you want any comments? Would you like to address the commission on anything?
So if there's nothing else, is there a motion on the item?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I second.
And the motion would be to approve the recommendation with the revised plat
With the condition,
with the current, the latest version.
that's our recommendation. Is that the
Yes.
approval you're making it in that way? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm second the same thing, just to make sure that the developer updates to their benefit that area is gonna be for commercial apartment use. The other lots they have on the lot.
It has to go on within 11, with the following items.
Okay.
You are-
So-
Yeah, because that's not what you have on file right now, right?
the master plan doesn't show it. It's shown in the Unit 2 plat.
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
So just to
you'll-
update the master plan?
Just to update.
So that it matches with.
Right.
So it matches what they want to what the city has in the records.
Placido, I actually did submit an updated master plan via email. I can re-forward it. I don't know if you received it.
So if we already
Okay.
have it, I apologize if we just didn't provide the right one. If we already have that, then they meet the request, then we'll go ahead and take care of that.
All right, so motion and second. Any further questions, comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 4, consideration and possible action on the preliminary plat of the Santa Maria Estate Subdivision Unit 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you have before you is a preliminary plat approval of Santa Maria State Subdivision Unit 2. Applicant Tech Services, property owner MBN Enterprises. Location is off of, south of the Latigo Apartments and Legacy Villas, off of Legacy Boulevard and north of 57 Heights subdivision. Here you have an aerial map of the site. And the request is to approve a preliminary plat approval or plat to subdivide an approximately 10.26 acre tract into 28 residential lots and in 2 multifamily lots, and allow the developer to install the improvements. So just to make a note of that, they do have to apply for a rezone for those 2 lots that are being proposed as R3A. They've submitted the application, but because they're not legal lots yet, they have to wait until the plat gets recorded. Is that correct, Placido? Because they don't have a legal description yet. Because they were under the impression that they were gonna get rezoned at this time, but there's no legal description for those lots. So therefore, they have to wait until it gets recorded.
Like it's not platted yet.
Yeah.
Do they not get zoned with the plat? Like the lots are getting zoned with the plat as R2 and then those 2 lots as the R3A? Is it during the platting process or do we have to come after the fact?
And we would have needed to notify of that rezoning included.
Yeah.
I think it could be done during plating, but being that it was previously, like when it was annexed, the annexation process included it as residential.
R2.
So we would have needed to do a public hearing or public notice alerting of the rezone, because that is a requirement that we put out that public notice, so we'll still need to do that part.
But we can do it, I think, before the final plat. But I don't know if you have to wait after.
I think we have to wait until it's platted, right? Yeah, we have to wait until it's
So you can have a
platted.
property description?
No, we don't.
Right.
There's no
There's no legal
deeds,
description.
meets and bounds for that.
But after it's platted, you'll have the property description.
Yes.
Also, we still need that. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get with you after, just look at those details.
So what would be your recommendation?
Well, the recommendation, I'll get to it. Just let me run through this really quick. So here you have the preliminary plat drawing. Here is a zoomed in plat. Like Placido mentioned before, it will connect to, the Calle
De Los Santos.
Calle de los Santos. So here are some of the key details, which is what I was mentioning to you all right now. There's 2 lots that are being proposed as R3A, for which a zoning change will be required after they become legal lots, with the recording of the plat. So that's good. And then our recommendation is, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends that the City Council grant preliminary plat approval of the Santa Maria State Subdivision Unit 2, subject to the final plat complying with the provisions of Article 3 of the City of El Paso Code of Ordinances, Chapter 23, governing procedures and specifications for final plats. And that concludes the report. If there's any questions for us planning or the engineer record.
Any questions from the commission?
None at this time.
Anything that I know?
No further comments or questions. Is there a motion on the item?
I motion to approve the recommendations of the City Legal Pass.
A motion by Commissioner Selena Sanchez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Velasquez. Any further comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, number 5, discussion of suggested revisions related to the amendment of Article 5 of the Parkland Dedication Ordinance.
So we're bringing some additional information. I know we've brought the item before you twice now. We had really good conversation at the last meeting, and good questions were brought up, so we want to bring some more information to address some of that. And so, on the right, you can see the Appendix A, which is towards the end of our draft ordinance amendment on the Parkland ordinance. A couple of key things I'm pointing out here in the left is there's some important assumptions that are part of these numbers that are being put together. So one assumption is the market value of an acre of undeveloped land or land that is being developed, which we have here is $20,000. And then, so these are numbers that were helped to put, this whole chart was helped by our consultant, Dr. Crompton. So he was using various information he could find, but ultimately, it is important that we help if we feel that that market value is incorrect, and, based on, realtors' knowledge and people who work in our area maybe have a better idea of if that is close to accurate or not. So it does impact the bottom line or ending number, what we plug into that piece. And then $300,000 per acre for park development, park improvements is the dollar amount that we put in there. That came a lot from the number that we provided, and that was based off of, again, the Villa Romel Park that we talked a lot about this last time, because that's the most recent one that we've done engineered plans for, engineered cost estimates for, and actually now have bids from local contractors who bid on the project. So now we actually have concrete numbers. But at the time, the engineer estimate was roughly 650,000 or somewhere along those lines, 600. And it's about a 1.5 acre park. So that was where he kind of made that estimate of 300,000 based off of those numbers from Villa Romel. So those are some key things I just want to point out as part of how these numbers fit together. And then here's a little bit more, again, using that Villa Romel Park as an example, being that's the most recent that we have numbers for. So this is a conceptual layout. The cul-de-sac at the end of Villa Romel would be over here to your left, and so there's a small parking area as you enter the property. There's a playground area in the middle, pretty small oval walking trail or path to be able to go around, exercise and whatnot, and then some green space and then landscaping around. And then also where the number 3 is, that is so like a community space or some shade, some cover, like barbecue pit type of area, some things like that. So again, this is just under 1.5 acres of small park. And the bids that we received 2 bids for this project a few weeks ago at our latest city council meeting. And one bid was for just under 900,000, and the other bid was under 600,000. But once we looked at the details of what their bid contained, they left out a big component. And so if you add that back in, or apples to apples, it would bump it up to somewhere in the $800,000 range. So those 2 bids to build, this type of a park in this size, local contractors are bidding them at $800,000 to $900,000. So that's actually a little bit higher than the $300,000 per acre estimate that we had put in there. So real costs, real dollars. It's a pretty big investment to build out a park. So I just wanted to show all these numbers. And again, just for more background on it, that was a 96 lot subdivision in 2 phases. First one was 44 lots, second one was 52. So there are a couple of commercial as part of that Via Romel across the other side of Town Square Boulevard. And the total of that area developed was 33 acres. So again, just want to give you guys real world numbers, real examples that go in with these dollars. So on other cities, we did some research to get back to you. Del Rio reported they don't charge parkland fee, they have no fee. Uvalde, same thing, they don't have a fee. Laredo's, they have a system that's based off of 256 units, which ties into 1,000 people. So for every 256 units, they require 1 acre of land and $80,000 for park improvements. So they have a similar system of what we're looking at, a land component as well as money for improvements. McAllen, they have a similar component where they factor in land and park improvements. And I copied and put the formula here just to be able to look at or showcase it. They also have a 5-acre typical park size as part of their ordinance. The 27,000, the first number you see there, that ties into their estimated land fee. So that just like I mentioned a few minutes ago, that we have 20,000 currently as our number for the land component per acre. They use 27,600 as their average cost per acre. And then 60,000 is the number they have for average park improvement fee. So quite low, way lower than what we currently have in there, and way lower than what we see as actual cost to build. But I just want to show you what their numbers are for City of McAllen, and then you work out their formula, and it comes out to just under $1,400 per unit. That would be their estimated costs per acre of developing parks. Now what they do, what's interesting about them is that then they decide, I guess, they're not gonna apply that full $1,400, even though that's what they estimate the actual cost to be. They then put in this percentage and say that the developer is only responsible for approximately 33% of that. So it ends up being $450 per unit total that they charge, and that is both to factor in land and improvements for City of McAllen. So
And who covers the rest of that?
the city would need to pick up the cost to actually build something out.
Were you able to find out the situation in Del Rio and Uvalde? They don't have a fee, so any suggestions as what they're doing?
So essentially that means the general taxpayer has to pay for any park that the city does. So I don't know, we weren't able to research like how many acres they have. Do they periodically add more parks as new subdivisions take place? I don't know if they're as regularly developing as we are and having, the 100+ lots, 120 or so per year that we see, but ultimately they don't have the fee as part of every development. I do have the City of Laredo's full parkland. I printed out a copy, and did you get one? I'm not sure if I put one.
I don't think I have
I put a few in front of everybody. Did everybody else get one? So this would be the full ordinance. So that's the full ordinance. We're not going to go over it right now in this meeting, but just in case you're curious or want to look at that and see how it compares to the full ordinance amendment that we're looking at right now. It has a lot of the same components and the same type of appendix that has the calculation. And so I just provided that to you for your reference. This is a table from a booklet or a resource that Dr. Compton put together. He did some thorough research of basically the whole state of Texas a few years ago. So it's not super current, but it's the most comprehensive and most current available type of list like this. So if you look towards the right, it shows you the fee in lieu for land only for various cities throughout the state that he was able to find that had a parkland ordinance. And so you see it varies quite a bit. You see some, like Alvin, Texas, $300. There's some that are 1,000, 650, 160, 250, there's a fairly high one, 1,800. So those are all per unit for the land component, not including improvements. Not as many cities that are like on this table have the improvement component of it. We found that in a much smaller number. I think it was about 10 or 12 that we were able to find have the separate park improvement fee. So those were the key details. We wanted to show some more numbers, some comparison to other cities, and then again breaking down a little bit more specifically like that Villa Romel Park. So we're open to any other suggestions or comments or more questions if you have. We do plan to take this before council on Tuesday, the next the regular meeting for council. We did also receive some legal comments. Mr. Valadez did review and provide some comments, so we did share those with you as well. But we open it up for comments, questions.
Last meeting we met, I proposed to have a meeting and invite all developers. Is that gonna be able to accommodate on the agenda before you meet, before presented?
Before, I don't think we'll be able to meet before, but I mean, that would be, if anything, a first reading out of a minimum of 3. So before actual adoption, it would definitely be possible.
Is city council approving anything, or is it like this, just
So
information?
it could go both ways. It would be presented to them. If they feel it's great as is, they may approve it as a first reading. If they have comments or questions or want more information, they may, we may table it and then it would just go for the next meeting.
But the item is being presented as an action.
Yes, that's the plan.
Well, the thing is that we're comparing ourselves to McAllen, which is a metro area of over 1 million citizens. And if you want to, can you please just, so the audience that might not be aware, how much is the fee in lieu that we have currently in Eagle Pass? And per lot, like for developers, and also the park line dedication that we went over last time, that they're paying right now? Like if they have the choice whether to give out the land or the fees they're paying. Because I see you mentioned that in McAllen, it's 1,393 per dwelling unit, correct? And what we have here, correct me if I'm wrong, you were recommending 1,527.
That's right.
Just to consider,
President, I have a word.
Which one coming up?
Yeah. I just wanna
What you
put in
stated.
my 2 cents.
Yeah, and we're glad you're here.
Developer and as a builder. And one of the things that I see happening here in Eagle Pass, especially with everything that's happened after the pandemic, as we all know, we have higher interest rates, inflation. The cost of lots is really getting out of hand. I'll be honest with you. Even though there's a market, people are paying and stuff, I'm looking at lots in San Antonio. And you can actually buy a lot in San Antonio cheaper than you can in Eagle Pass. And we all know that the economies of scale and the economics of San Antonio compared to Eagle Pass is never going to be the same right now. So I don't know, I know you all are working on a master plan for roads, for roadways, and maybe updating your city master plan. Maybe you can pinpoint, I don't know what the formula for the radius of parks. I really enjoy parks because I'm a person that walks too. And we need more parks, but we also need to maintain them. So I know that has to go with the city budget and all that stuff. So have you all thought about finding out what the radius would be to have parks
Because you don't wanna have a park in every subdivision. I mean, that's not, one developer's gonna need a park, and then the other one in the city's gonna say it's too close, you don't need a park, pay the fee. So maybe you all can have some input with adjacent property owners that are closer to the city limits or are developing and say, you know what, I think parks would fit good in these areas, to where several subdivisions can use the parks, they're nearby. And then come up with a formula to where, I don't know, a per lot fee or whatever, to where the city actually matches the cost of the land. And you build a park within a certain amount of time, not 10 years, 15 years later. You know, make it kind of a joint effort. Then again, we know that all that cost that the developer incurs, somehow or another, the end buyer is gonna pay for it. He's gonna pay when he buys a lot. So ultimately, the consumer is gonna pay. We need to remember that. Because I do see a lot of things, materials have doubled. In a lot of cases, labor's higher. I know in our firm, we have to pay higher wages to hire good quality labor, which I'm all for it, but you gotta have the market to sustain it. So, we need to bring more business, more industry, more jobs, so that people can actually afford to pay for what's happening right now. Because we do wanna grow, but it's our job and the politicians and these commissions to help. How can we grow? First of all, how can we create jobs, better paying jobs? I mean, because if not, you're not gonna have the monies or the professional people or the skilled people coming in to pay for these lots.
Can I say something also?
Yep, come on up. You just state your name, please.
I'm Ken Dirksen from Uvalde. I'd compliment on coming up to give his remarks, and he's correct, actually. The little neighborhood parks in these subdivisions, that was tried for a while, but those don't, they're a maintenance problem, and they don't, it just doesn't seem like they get used that much. A bigger area where you have more of a playground, several acres at a time. You know, on the thing, the display up there is that Uvalde doesn't have an ordinance, but Uvalde is kind of shrinking, declining in population, honestly. But the way that the Uvalde and Del Rio have handled the parks is that they've actually negotiated. They've picked out places that are parks, and then they've actually looked for people to come and develop. You're a developer, you pick out a place where you want to do this or donate the land for this, and then the city does take on the responsibility of furnishing it through grants and whatnot. But, and then also like in Del Rio, one of the big things they did going through the Buena Vista subdivision, there they have a unique situation that they have a wide, flat creek that's accessible, but you really can't build in it because it's all floodplain. And so it's in the floodplain, but it's just a wide, flat creek that they developed for soccer fields and basketball courts and playgrounds and so forth, going up and down, all the way up and down the creek. So they picked that as a way to develop parks through that part of town. But they're looking at more at an area wide, instead of doing out of a 50-lot subdivision, dedicating 1 or 2 lots to be a park, like a little neighborhood pocket park. They're not necessarily doing that. They're looking for the wider areas. The smaller parks, they are just a problem to maintain. It doesn't seem like they get used.
One more thing, a comment that I like to make. Years back, in my early 50s, late 40s, I used to coach my sons in baseball, you know, and I was lucky to take them to regionals and go to Arkansas and go to Oklahoma. And I was amazed at the parks they had over there, because we used to go, the first thing we did is find a park to go practice, because you couldn't actually practice on the baseball field before we were going to play. So we would go find parks, and I was really impressed at the beautiful parks they had. And like Ken was saying, there were actually parks that were big. Lots of green space, lots of area for the kids to play soccer, to practice baseball. You know, people walking, community restrooms, you know, really, really nicely maintained by the cities. And I think we need to work on something similar to that. Because now with the sports complex, the idea is to start bringing in traveling teams and people to stay in the hotels, to leave money with room tax. All this deal brings money to the community. But they're gonna be needing parks. They're not gonna be able to practice at the sports complex on the artificial turf. Or do you let them?
No.
You see? So they're the first thing they're gonna say, hey, where do we practice with the kids? Where's some green area where we can go practice? Or walking trails and stuff like that. So, yeah, we do need to see something with your master plan. And like Doris was saying, maybe not only bring in developers, bring in the public, you know, to see what's really needed. I know ultimately, everything's gonna take money, but we gotta find a way to do it.
Well, do y'all have a master plan for your parks?
There's a Parks Master Plan.
Okay, so you've designated different areas, you're gonna pick places to go and do parks. That's what I do, have the neighborhoods, if there's development in that area, dedicated to use those resources, those funds to develop that. Because that's what I think, that's one of the things that I know Uvalde has, and I believe Del Rio has also, is they have their parks master plan where they're developing. Because like one of the big things that they got is soccer fields, or baseball fields, for the children to practice their, it seems like more than just daytime playing, they're involved in the organized sports, and so they need a place to go practice soccer, and so they're using open areas, behind grassed areas around businesses and whatnot to play. So they're trying to develop those kind of things for the children to play.
Anyway.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
Placido, if I'm not mistaken, I think we did have a master plan, and there was a study done that identified certain places that green areas and parks would be placed. This was several years back, maybe 3-4 years back. And so that should still be there.
There is a Parks Master Plan that identifies all our existing inventory, all the parks that we have.
In future,
It shows kind of like Ken referenced radiuses depending on the type of park or size of park. They're designed to serve a certain radius around them.
Right.
And so it kind of touches on what you see there at the top on the right. That's our inventory. That's a snip. Those are details from our Parks Master Plan that identifies how many community parks, acreage we have, how many neighborhood parks, ball fields, linear parks, colonias, and then has the total there, which all that ties back into, when you divide by population, it gives you the amount of park acreage we have per resident. So it comes out to 1 acre per every 129. And so a big part of this ordinance, or what the goal is essentially, is to be able to maintain that. Because if we don't keep building parks at the level of that, basically 1 acre per 129, then that just means more and more people for the same amount of parks. They start getting overcrowded. They start not being able to service as well because they're designed for a certain number of people. So that's basically the whole thing. What all this sums up with, the parkland ordinance, is making sure that we have something in place that will help keep the level of service we want to provide. Right now, I think we talked about this at a previous meeting, or maybe Dr. Crumpton touched on it, but we're right at basically the low level or the minimum level of recommended acreage of different types per person, per population. So we're okay, actually. There's many other communities that don't reach those levels of acres of community parks and regional parks and things like that per population that are those recommended numbers. So we're at a pretty decent place, but if we keep having subdivision after subdivision and not maintaining or not building the parks at the level that we have now, all those new people will be going to the existing parks and they essentially oversaturate. So that's the whole purpose of what we're trying to get at here, and trying to make sure it's fair and equitable with who pays for, or who's the right person to pay for it, adding these extra parks that are specifically to maintain the level for these new homes coming in. So generally, that's the whole concept and why a lot of cities have moved to this, is they're saying, okay, the city's currently at this level that I think where most everybody's okay with, it feels comfortable. So if 100 new homes are coming in, it makes sense to many that those 100 new homes factor in to cover the cost of the parks they need so that the community still maintains that same level.
Right, and that's why I think that meeting is super important, because what the city's doing is we're trying to leverage what resources we have. Walking trails through grants, a little bit of city money, green spaces, figuring out how we can get all these resources, figure out how we can get all these amenities for our citizens, but also not kill them in their pocket,
Right.
right? And so that's why there's some give and take. And so I think it's beneficial that we get everybody together and see where finance is, where grants is, where the developers are, and have a little bit of input and come together and see what each one is willing to do and can do. Because, yeah, I mean, housing prices are going up. And it is going to cost more to the individual, but if the city's paying for it, it also costs more to the individual in taxes. So either way, it's the individual that's going to be paying out. So we need to figure out ways that we can leverage.
Yep, those are good points, and we do try to get grants as much as we can, but yeah, that's a really important point.
Also, if I may, just go over last time when we met, we made a comment in regards to the land requirements. I'm gonna read the first paragraph, letter A, that says, "The city recognizes that maintaining many small parks is difficult and costly. Therefore, it will not normally accept a dedication that is smaller than 5 acres of contiguous land." 5 acres, and we discussed it, I said it's too much because it's too broad. We have developers that most of our newest developments are, 10 acres, 15 acres. You're gonna ask them for half or the land. I mean, I think this needs to be modified, and I don't know what you have in mind to present on Tuesday. That's why my opinion was, before they go in front of the council, to meet with the community developers and see what we can do as a community, not just to meet a deadline, to make sure that it's not only on paper and that it will work. Because we thank the local investors and developers, but we have lost a lot of business because of these requirements and restrictions. Other people would rather go and invest somewhere else. And if we, honestly speaking, also the assumption of the 20,000 per acre for land, that's also too broad. What are we talking about? What kind of land, where, because it might not be the 20,000, so.
And the price of land right now, certainly not 20,000.
Well, it depends on the area.
So it'll be.
That's undeveloped for 20,000, it depends on the area, but also, I mean, it doesn't say it's an average or, all these terms in here, like, I don't think it clarifies the intention of the land requirement as only leave it as that they will not take less than 5 acres. Can you imagine a new development or development company, if you're telling them, I have 15 acres and you want me to give you 5 acres? It's a lot of money they're investing, and like Mr. Lipson says, with all due respect, it will be a great idea just to see, that's why I propose to see what other nearby cities are doing in regards to parks. Because there's grants, there's other ways where we can get the monies. We understand the need of parks, we all want parks, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to give away 5 acres in general, regardless of the size of the subdivision. And also the, I think there's a big discrepancy when it comes to the fee in lieu of land that we have compared to others that don't have it, and compared to other locations like the one you mentioned. We don't even have, what's the population we have? It says we have 28,000. We're comparing ourselves to McAllen, which is over 1 million. So just to take that into account.
Yeah, the amount of revenue that they're pulling in
Yeah.
per population is way disproportionate.
No, that's not a good with all due respect, I know you're doing your job to get comparisons, but McAllen, it's out of our league. And this is just to work in harmony to make sure that everybody contributes for the improvement of Eagle Pass. And I would hate just to go to the council and say, okay, put it in writing, approve it, when then you're gonna have more problems in the future, having developers and the consumer not happy, asking for variance and stuff like that. If we do it right the first time, we don't have to come back again and again and again making changes. But I think we're still lacking a lot of information, and I think we are off in too many parameters here, you know. And that's why we proposed last time to have a meeting including the community, developers, builders. And I appreciate that you guys took the time to get the information from Uvalde, Del Rio, and other nearby cities. But let's learn what they're doing so we can improve it for the benefit of our community. That's just my opinion. I don't think we're ready to vote for something or just leave it up to, you know, and just pass it on, because it defeats the purpose of our commission.
Yeah, I just don't want to see the burden fall on one particular person, be it the taxpayer, be it the developer, the city, and ultimately the taxpayer. I think there has to be different leverages, different avenues that we can explore, and then together build it to where we need it, to where it's reasonable, feasible for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the main thing where we're taking your comments. Ultimately, nothing goes through until council approves, so I assume they'll be directing us to do that kind of workshop, get more community engagement on this. We're just showing the numbers and mainly just pointing out it's unfeasible. It can't keep going the way it is. If we collect such a tiny amount from the developments and get 10%, 15% of what it actually costs to do parks, we'll never be able to maintain it. We're gonna keep worsening or weakening the level of parks per population. And while I get it that maybe
Well, not necessarily, because there's other ways and avenues.
well, we do all those
you
things.
know.
We get a lot of grants. We already are doing those things, but there's not always, we can't get 100% of the cost of parks through grants all the time. It just supplements, of course. But, I mean, I think there's a lot of important points. One is, I know you mentioned it's difficult, or the costs are too high, we run out businesses. Maybe they say, we're not gonna wanna develop here, we'll go somewhere else because fees are too high. Well, at the same time, almost all the successful high top students from our area leave and don't come back because we don't have a quality of life. And a lot of that is not having parks and trails and systems to have a nice quality of life. So
Well, I think it's
feel like
because
there's
we don't have a
there's
4-year anniversary,
there's
which
a
now we're
two-way
gonna have, you
street.
know.
When we're talking about, you know, what we want to offer or what we want to charge, we have to realize that too. You know, it's been a problem all my life, probably, you know, all the history of Eagle Pass. And I do want to make sure it's really clear. So the 5 acres for a 10-acre development, 15-acre, that will never happen. That's not part of this.
Yeah,
It's
because
not-
that's the way it's written.
No. So
And then it was
those
changed to
would not-
3.5.
Those would not donate land, is what that says. So if it says 10-acre, 15-acre, that's gonna have 40, 50 lots, that means they're doing cash, they're not gonna do a 5-acre park. There would never be a situation like that such a small development would have to do 5 acres.
Yeah, but the way it is written right now, that's why I don't know if he's an attorney or who was revising this, because the first time we read it, it was too broad. So we need to make sure that it makes sense what they're trying to propose. You know, 5 acre, but it didn't say
Yeah.
what was the minimum land that they were gonna develop, or maximum, what I'm saying, so.
Yeah, so it ties back into this ratio. So basically, you want to look at rough math. So it would be 1 acre to 129 is the level we're trying to maintain with this formula as it is right now. And again, this formula could change completely. You have recommendations what to change in council, but it's 1 acre for every 129. So 5 acres would mean for 650 roughly residents. So you divide that back by the average of 3.6 occupants per home. Do a quick math on the calculator.
Are
So
you talking about the 5 acres, all contiguous, or one parcel.
That's what they were proposing.
And I believe that language came from Dr. Crumpton, is that correct?
So that's about 180 units. This is language from Dr.
Right,
Crumpton.
so that wasn't anything just to answer your question, I believe that came from
Yeah, I
from
know,
the
I
consultant.
understand.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why we're bringing it to the attention. But I would like for you to reconsider, because it looks very nice on paper. We're not McAllen. And to be honest with you, I've been a real estate broker for many years. I'm also seeing the other part from a different perspective.
Yeah, I don't think that language came from us, though.
No, I
Yeah, yeah.
I
It did not
understand
come
that.
from legal.
No,
purposes.
Right,
I
right.
understand that.
Yeah.
But, you know, comparing ourselves to McAllen, and once again, the fee in lieu and everything to the population of Eagle Pass, you know, I think there's other ways where we can get this done, that it won't, I don't feel it's gonna have to be necessarily coming from developers, because at the end of the day, the consumer is the one paying for it.
Exactly.
And then you gotta understand their investment, you know, to start off just a subdivision, it requires a lot of money, time and effort. And it's not like, oh, here, you know, I'm gonna start with the streets and everything, and to put the park and give up 5 acres is not feasible for Eagle Pass. Might work for McAllen, but we don't have the revenue, income, everything else as in McAllen.
Yeah, and that's what we're all here for,
Mhm.
is these are best practices looking at the whole state of Texas. So these are recommendations based on
Mhm.
everyone, not McAllen, not Eagle Pass. This is his recommendation, this is him, this is one of the main experts. There's not many people more knowledgeable or have more expertise than this Dr. Crumpton. So this is his recommendation based on looking at every parkland ordinance in the whole state. And kind of what are the best practices, what are the needs, what are the trends? But that's what we're here for, to say, okay, maybe that's for the average for the state of Texas, but maybe we need to go lower, maybe we need to change, reduce some of these numbers. So that's what we're here for, and all these things are open for change. These are just, again, his recommendation based on his review, and it's a great start. We're really thankful for him, because it would take us forever to get this type of a draft based on the knowledge he already has. So this is, again, our starting point. Everything is up for change. We're open to all these are good suggestions that you're making. I heard the question about contiguous, so it is, and I appreciate both their support on that item, is it's not really feasible and it's not really effective to have these 1.5 acre parks like the Villa Romel. You know, in some cases where a park is really needed, there's not really anything around there, so something's gonna be definitely better than nothing. But, you know, what he talked about, what he saw in other cities, and what Ken talked about, 3, 4, 5 acre parks are what are more attractive, what are more, I guess, fun, and improve the quality of life. And so, no, not each developer, each subdivision is not gonna have to do one of those on their own. It's gonna be one for, you know, a couple of hundred of houses. But,
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure it out, because
Yes.
the way it was assumed, it was like, okay, new subdivision, this requirements apply. And even if they start with phase 1, 2, or 3, so like Mr. Lipson says, we might not need one park for every subdivision, you know. It could be 2 or 3 subdivisions nearby or so, you know, you gotta find the.
yeah, and that's what the goal is, and there's also a way of doing it that the city, you know, let's say an area of town totally undeveloped, you know, acres and acres ranch, where you go and acquire that 5 acres before anything is around there at all. And then it's part of the master plan, where then as things develop, it gets developed around it. The city already has acquired the land. Typically you got it at a better rate because it's totally inaccessible, no utilities or anything at the time, but it's planned in so that then that area has a nice 5 acre park for a whole, you know, master plan community or a couple hundreds of homes. So there's ways to go about, where again, it's not all the burden is, that's not the idea, is to put such a huge burden on every developer and every development. But again, yeah, maybe we can tweak some of the wording if it's not clear enough, it's vague, it's not conveying the right message, but ultimately we're just going for the big picture of trying to maintain parks, trying to improve quality of life, and trying to make sure that the cost of that is going to an appropriate place or fair place, and it's not just general taxpayer. I like to thank my grandma every time. It's like, my grandma 80-something years old. She's not going to these parks. She's lived in Eagle Pass for all her life. Like, why would she be the one to take on the burden to put a new park in from that neighborhood? So that's the way, you know, things that come into my mind when I'm looking at all this. Now, maybe a part of it, you know, covering the regional park, the sports complex. I think every person, you know, may go there once in a while, so I can see that. But, you know, it's just kind of balancing that, because there's different, the main regional parks, neighborhood parks, and maybe, you know, maybe the pocket parks, the real mini ones, are maybe not that effective and too costly to maintain. So maybe we don't work towards those, but at least neighborhood and the regional, who's the right person to cover those costs? And that's, you know, that's why we're having this conversation. But they're all really good comments. We're definitely taking note of all this. There definitely will be workshops or invitation, and we'll invite all of you. We'll invite all the development community, realtors, anybody who, I mean, everybody really, but we'll invite all the people who would definitely impact based on their industry. So any other comments, or a lot of good comments already shared, but.
Yeah, Placido, we have a document here that's legal review of the ordinance. Do you have any further information on that? I see some comments or suggestions on it.
So, Mr. Rupa, you want to talk about that? I provided it in copy to the commissioners.
So legal always reviews any ordinance, any legislative action in terms of any possible challenges to it, right? Our role is not to talk about the specifics so much of what the city or certain city departments are trying to establish, but whether, as written, these things could pose difficulty later on because somebody might come and challenge you that. So our comments are in that context of, you know, for example, we've talked about it already, some clarifying language, right? There are certain portions where there was perhaps too much discretion. You know, we felt that that could be something that down the road could be challengeable by someone that, you know, doesn't agree with these ordinances or something like that. So our analysis is just from a legal framework. Hey, this is something that could stand up to a challenge, or this is something that is constitutionally sound that you're going to pass, and it's going to be airtight. So what you have in front of you are our comments based on what planning presented to us, and some suggestions on ways to address those.
Do you have any specific information on the first one? It's a section 23-77 general requirements. The comment reads that it's too vague. Do you have further information as to how it could be better?
Well, so for example, I think the language in that case, right, talks about discretion, at the sole discretion of the city. Right? What you want is some kind of uniformity so that all the developers that come to you know what they're up against, right? They know what they have to do. And the language as is could be construed as, there's two things we always look at when we're analyzing this language, is what's called vagueness, right? If it's too vague and the average citizen, the average developer doesn't have an opportunity to understand, there's no rubric, in other words, to understand these are the things that we have to meet to get it approved by the city. So vagueness is one, and overbreadth is the other, which means that the city has gone outside of its purview in controlling some of these things. So in this instance, we're recommending, okay, let your developers know these are the things that will lead us to make these decisions, right? So sole discretion in that case might be a little too broad. It can still be in the city's sole discretion, but within these parameters. Right.
So really on that one, the issue is that last part that's highlighted, the sole discretion.
Sure, I made sure and went through and highlighted what I thought needed to be addressed and what the issue was, and how we might do it. And it's ultimately a back and forth, obviously, right? It's what the board and the city council want to establish. You weigh that against, you know, what's constitutionally sound, and we go back and forth, and, you know, we keep trying it. We try not to insert language because that's up to you all to do, but we just review it for its soundness. But most of these are in that framework of, hey, let's let developers know what the rules of the game are. In other words.
So ties a lot with Ms. Salina Sanchez and being more specific.
Sure.
comments, questions? Anything else, Mr. Matt?
No, but just thank you. It was a good debate, and that's what we're here for, is we're not gonna get to a real good product if everybody's not, honest and telling, from their perspective, because we have a lot of good, experienced people here, so it's good to hear from all the different, viewpoints. So thank you for all those comments. We'll let you know when there's a workshop or public meeting on this topic.
What is what do you think are the next steps, or what is the plan on the ordinance in the near future?
So we'll be taking this draft to show to council, we'll be taking all the comments that we received from you, and show them, this is a starting point. Where do we go from here? Is this close to something that they're willing to approve? Needs minor tweaks? Is it, kind of start all over again? Or is it, hey, we like City of Laredo's, why don't we just look a little bit more closely at that one and model? We will be taking direction on what are the big steps, but I do think it's an important point that in between these first steps and kind of just getting a lot of feedback from you before we get further, there will be the community input part two to hear from everybody and anybody that's going to be impacted, which are a lot of people.
Can I make a recommendation to you? If you're mentioning you are going to invite the community and investors and to have further meetings, it would be a great idea if you can prepare the planning map for the parks the way it is right now and what you're proposing, so that way you'll be ready with facts to share with the community or whomever's gonna be present.
A map to show the parks?
Like the master plan.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. We did have Mr. Ricky Gutierrez, the Assistant Parks Director. He's been very involved. He's been planning in parks, working on this, collaborating on this with Dr. Crompton, his help. And he did ask, do you think I should go? Because obviously he's the most, him and Mr. Sanchez, the most knowledgeable on the Parks Master Plan, what we have, as well as what we are lacking and where. And so, based on it being Friday, I was like, I didn't think, but it probably would have been good. He could have addressed some of those questions for you. So if you like, we could have this for a future, we'll bring this back at the next meeting.
Yeah, or
I'll
you
invite
can email us a
Mr.
copy of it.
Gutierrez. We'll bring some of those Parks Master Plan components, maps, and he can come and talk about that with you as well. So we'll-
You need to go to council. You need to accompany you to council.
they are at the council meeting, so they'll be there for that one, yeah. But if, to talk for you guys as well, for your purpose, we could do that at the next meeting if you like.
All right, so it's not an action item, so we have no further items in the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
I second that.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Salinas. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 6:39 PM.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Friday.
Friday feels weird doing a meeting on a Friday.
I know. Bye. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Appreciate all your comments.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Okay, te lo encargo. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.